I want to welcome everybody here to the recording today. We've got attorney Joe Durham and my buddy Richard Munchkin, who used to run the podcast Gambling with an Edge. He's got a new podcast out now, but we're going to try and put Gambling with an Edge back together today. Joe Durham is going to tell us a few gambling stories, and we've got a bunch of questions for him. Joe, I think the first question we want to start out with and let you discuss, I get this question a lot in my DMs, and it's about betting partnerships. That's all the rage right now on Twitter. Everybody wants to be in a betting partnership. Tell me, is it legal if we get in one, me and you? What do we got to do? How does it work?
Well, okay, so it's funny that you're getting lots of DMs about it, because I get lots of DMs, calls, and everything else about it. So it's something I've put a lot of time and energy into try to learning. And the answer in a typical lawyer fashion, is it legal? Well, it depends. There are so many different versions of a quote betting partnership, whatever that means to any given person. Certainly, in states where it's legal, people that want to pool their money together, make some joint venture, do things. They certainly can do that. They need to at times be aware of what the terms and conditions are of if they're using an internet-based, a phone app or something like that, betting through a computer, but certainly that can be legal. Then, it goes everything from there to everything to, two people who find some local guy that is running a pay-per-head site that they say, hey, I'm going to give to one of these renowned bettors that's out there on Twitter asking for partnerships and whatnot. I'm going to let you use my account. And the question as to whether that's legal is where we get into some really interesting stuff, because each state is different first. And while we've moved to a lot of states that are now moving to legalize, and a lot like Georgia are really on the verge, and I keep saying that about Georgia because the last couple of years it's been right down to the end. But there's also federal law involved. And so the issue becomes really is, where is the bet placed? And there hadn't been really much of any true prosecutions or law enforcement getting into that particular issue as it relates to the player. Now, there are tons of, we all can read where some big bookie outfit, there's one around Birmingham, Alabama last year. There was one in Chicago a couple of years ago that they get arrested, but you never hear about the players getting in trouble. And there is a lot of legal academics out there that have written articles in law reviews and journals that have taken the position that, because the server where the bet's being done is in Costa Rica, somewhere there, that there's a strong argument that the bet was actually placed outside the United States and might be legal, whereas the bookie who's collecting the money is doing everything in the United States. So it's a gray area. Again, I think the level of safety is much higher for the player on that than for being the bookie for sure. And hence, if you look at some of the laws that I've used in these cases that I know we're going to talk about today, they give the player a lot of protection potentially in those situations.
Well, that's definitely what we want to hear.
Yeah, the main thing I tell everyone, and this has there's been a rash of this lately, is someone, and I'll just say Twitter gambling expert number one. There's a list of them. We all know who they are. They're sort of the heavyweights of the world of sports gambling, if you will. We all know them. We see them on Twitter, and we know what they do. But when you start dealing with people that you don't have a long-term relationship with, it's always good to have something about and a good understanding. Hey, are we 50-50 on this? Are we 60-40? As more and more people get into the legal markets, let's just face it, if y'all are, let's say it was legal here in Georgia, hypothetically, and we were working on a partnership, and I was putting in, 5,000 of my money, 5,000 your money, and I was going to bet on BYU hypothetically tonight, and it was half ours. There needs to be somewhere that needs to be understood as what the shares of the joint venture is, what I like to call it. It can be a very loosely worded, I think is a good way of putting it, but something, because I have had a rash of things lately where people have worked with some of these professionals and they've made money. Then all of a sudden, instead of this time we're funding it with 10 grand, we're going to fund it with 30 grand or 40 grand. And the local guy says, thanks, I'm out of here and I'm keeping the money and gone. So we actually, for one of the largest syndicate groups out there, they contacted me. I represented them, guys in New York, we threatened to file a lawsuit based on the fact that we were able to clearly show that, look, they sent him the money. It was legal where he was, placing the wagers. We knew what the wager results were, and he just kind of disappeared and quit responding to them. So I got involved. We started emailing back and forth. I sent him a detailed, very lawyerly email, if you will, that said, hey, these are the terms of the settlement where you're going to pay it back. And he said, yeah, that's good. And then he backed out and didn't make his payment. So actually that suit is in progress right now. He was served over the weekend, actually. So I think that's a cautionary tale for everyone. When you're sending someone cash to do something, even if it's a text message or whatever, there needs to be something in writing. If they don't do what's right, that they can say, hey, that was my money and this was our agreement. So
yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, that sounds really good. The problem we really have in our world here of gambling is everybody does everything on a handshake, a nod. Right. And it's just because it feels like everybody trusts everybody in this ecosystem that we have. So nothing gets put in writing, nothing. So that's a real problem for an attorney like you, because I say, well, here's the document. You'll say, where's the document of your agreement? And I'll say, document? We both said we were going to do this. So you're telling me we really got to have an agreement in writing.
And I'm not talking about a super formal 12-page operating agreement, but let's say if you were sending someone 10 grand, send a text or however you communicate this. Hey, I'm sending you this 10 grand. I'm wiring it from this. Just want to make sure that you understand that, you'll send me my portion back upon my demand or something like that. If there's something to acknowledge that there's a reason you sent it. And I think, to be honest now, you have to word or adjust your wording for what your message or your agreement's going to be based on what the joint venture that you're involved with. Like I said, if it's legal, hey, put it in there. We're doing a joint venture here to bet legally at this place. Yeah, you might be violating the terms of service for whatever, FanDuel, BetMGM, or whoever it is, but that has nothing to do with your legal obligations to someone that you are working with on a joint venture. If it's not necessarily, let's say you're doing it for, maybe you were funding an offshore account at, Bet Online or wherever, again, something to say, hey, just want to confirm we're putting this money together. These are the splits. This is how we're going to do it. Doesn't have to be super detailed. But when, John Doe comes across and that account's up to 50, 60 grand and you can't get in touch with him, that you have something to prove, hey, this is what we were doing. So that's important, because as more and more people enter into these partnerships and then see the opportunity to make money, they forget that, hey, I can make, every several $1,000s, maybe every month, just sitting here doing nothing. Then they get this big windfall of 25, 30,000, and they're going to try to make off with it. And it's wrong. First off, it's stealing is all it is. But that is happening a lot. And like I said, I've got a serious case going for a very large group right now, a group that if I said their name, which I'm not going to, everyone would know. And this group of people actually, I've worked with them for a long time in a lot of different ways. They actually formed a formal limited liability company that outlines the management of everything they do, because they're doing it legally. And so that was, again, based on some advice and it helps them with some of their record keeping and how they're going to do things. So that's the biggest advice I can give.
How does that work though? If I'm in Las Vegas and my partner is in Tennessee, but you're in Georgia,
all right.
Yeah, how does that work?
So that's a great question, because I keep thinking back to I had another conversation, and again, I don't want to betray confidences because that's at the heart of what I do as a living, but another large group that, again, if I told you all who it was or the listeners here, they'd know. And I said, this is what I tell them. Number one, if, partner A is in Vegas, partner B is in Tennessee, you draft an agreement and you have an agreement, then you decide this agreement is based where, where is the principal office or the primary office? Y'all have to decide that. And I think as part of that agreement, you first then decide, you look at where are the laws best, where the tax, issues, where are those going to be best. Don't be, penny wise and pound foolish. Pay some money to a good CPA that can analyze those issues for you. You may, on those things, get a counsel, from a lawyer that can address those things for you. Then what I do is I encourage everyone is, when you put these joint venture agreements out there, especially with your John Doe or someone, I say, look, let's draft it. You may be, again, let's use you're in Vegas, he's in Tennessee example. What I say is we're going to put in that joint venture agreement certain language that says, hey, for purposes of this agreement, we both agree that either there's an arbitration provision that says what state law it's going to be governed under. And if you don't want to do arbitration, you still have something saying this agreement will be governed under the laws of state, whatever you want. I always recommend my clients, even though they may not be in Georgia, to use Georgia law because that's what I'm familiar with. And then also say that both parties will agree to be subject to jurisdiction and venue in Georgia, which is perfectly legal. It's done all the time in commercial contracts. Again, so if I'm going to be representing you or you want my help, it's right there where I'm able to do it. And you're working with me as a lawyer that you've dealt with for a long time. And those clauses, they're called forum selection clauses. Most every time you open an account anywhere, anytime you see those terms and services that you never read and you just click through, they're usually arbitration or forum selection clauses and those things. So, and they're a very good tool. But like I say, people shouldn't have a problem signing them if they're going to do right, because all it is saying what I'm going to do, what you're going to do, and if we get into some sort of disagreement, how it's going to be resolved.
That sounds
but people
really
don't
good.
want to take the time. Yeah, that's the thing, though. What in y'all's world, the professional bettors are working around the clock this time of year. I mean, it is around the clock. And I always say you either need to take some time and say, okay, lawyer Joe or lawyer whoever, draft this for me without, and get it to me when it's done, or take some time at some point during whatever little bit of an off season you may have, depending on your level, what you do as a specialty, to put some real focus into this, because pretty much every partnership, group, whatever, eventually encounters some turbulent times. It just happens. Look at lawyers. We split up firms all the time. Look at doctors, accountants. People split up all the time, and it's always easier if you've agreed ahead of time how everything's going to be done. So you can spend a little money on the front end, or potentially spend a ton or lose a ton on the back end.
Yeah, it's very true. I know what I want for Christmas from you. I want you to open an office in Vegas, and I need you to be able to practice in Vegas. That's what I need from you.
I would absolutely love that. That would be great, because I can tell you this area that I've sort of developed this little bit of niche in, just because of sort of random happenstance, but have been doing it for a while now, is a growing area. I mean, it really is a growing area, and as more and more states become with legalization, it's something more and more that I'm gonna do. And the laws in each state are different, and one of the things, each state is always worried about lawyers practicing without a license in another state. So that's another reason I say, look, if you want me to be yours, let's put this here in Georgia where I know the laws, where I can practice with no problem. I have been admitted on what we call pro hac vice in a number of other states, and tried cases in a number of different states as well. But that's something that I encourage everyone. But as it grows, I'm gonna have to definitely look into some of this, some other things.
Well, I want to switch gears just slightly, and this is a discussion that comes up a lot on my DMs also. And I used to, right now with football season going on, anybody who is serious in this game is working at least 14 hours a day. You're in front of your screen, you're tied down. There's nothing else you can do. And I don't even think anybody that's spending less than 14 hours a day is serious. So if you're spending 12, I think you're a rookie. You're not even involved. So, but when it's slower before football, there's a lot of sports books that are not in the state of Nevada. And I hate that. And there are a whole bunch of them in Arizona. So I have to drive to the border. It takes me about 40 minutes to the border and getting back. That's an hour and a half I don't have during football season. So I have to give up all the Arizona books. Why can I not just bet from my seat in Las Vegas at an Arizona book? Why can't I do that?
Because the laws say you can't. I mean, that's a bit of a smart ass answer, but that's the truth at the end of the day. They're all very peculiar about being in those states, and for probably lots of different reasons, as you can imagine, for tax purposes and everything else. It makes it clean. And then the big issue is, obviously it's legal in both Nevada and Arizona. But then if you were, it'd be hard for them probably from a technology standpoint to differentiate. Okay, they know their geolocation inside Arizona, but hey, how do we know where it's coming from? This state's legal, this case isn't. So my guess, and again, that's something I don't know, but I'm guessing they don't want to have to worry about that. So they just, lock it in as hard as they can on their state lines.
Well, also, I think it's actually better for us, Scott, that we can't, because right now every state sets up their own laws. Whereas if we had a federal law that said sports betting is legal in the U.S., well, then all these companies would have the same line in every state. Whereas right now, if you have a partner in Arizona or a partner in another state, you have all these different books that are going to have different lines and more opportunities, for you to make money, assuming you can
Absolutely.
make the partnerships to do it.
Well, I mean, as you all know, just for example, I saw that one of the real big Twitter, I shouldn't say just Twitter, but one of the world's most well-known gamblers made a post on Twitter about how a lot of the college football game lines fell right on the number, on Saturday. And then you look at what happened Monday night or last night with Cincinnati, that game, numbers matter. And you can find, you might be able to look and find that different edge at each one, and finding that makes a big difference for people that are doing what y'all are doing full-time every day. That extra 1%, that you might gain can make a huge difference in your total financial stability and your gross earnings over the course of, whether it be with a week, obviously there's too much variability, but I bet you get to a year, that 1%, mark every year, it becomes really significant. So, and another thing I think, Munchkin, what you just said is right, is, having those things, this is where if you find someone you can trust, that you can do, this joint venture or whatever. Again, I'm not telling you to go violate the terms and services that you sign up to agree to, but that's how you, if you're going to approach it that way, that's what you need to do.
Well, I think the half point means more than you actually think it does, because I think it could literally turn you from a winning bettor to a loser bettor if you don't do it. That's why something like Spank Odds, where you're able to see what the best line is of all your sports books, it's not the important thing, it's the most important thing. I'd rather have the best number than the winner, because if you have the best number, you can't help but win. But if you it's just that simple.
Well, I saw last year Fats was on a Twitter feed with someone, and they were talking about that. And it is, if you're getting that the best number across the board over a longer period of time, you are going to win significantly. End of story. You could blind bet every game, and if you're getting the better end, you're going to be a rich man at the end of the day. If you could do that again over a large enough period, where there's a big enough sample. And that's one of the things, I consider myself to be a pretty intelligent guy, but I've never understood how you guys can figure out what this 3.5 is worth, or the 2.5 to 3, or the 3 to 3.5. Those things, it blows my mind, because one of the things I learned when I first kind of got behind the curtain here is that I always thought that your professional gamblers were like your mobster types. That's what we were led to believe with television and everything. And I'm learning that it's these people that are truly internet whiz, financial guys that have just found a market that is, easier to beat, at the end of the day, if all things are level and equal. So it's fascinating to me.
Mobster is my day job.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Munchkin can count to 21 faster than anybody I've ever met. That's what kind of mobster
There you go.
But here's the trick. If you want to know what a half point is worth, I'll just give you the secret right now. All you have to do is go to Spank Odds, open your bookies. We have a bookie for an alternate Pinnacle 1, alternate Pinnacle 2, Pinnacle 3, and Pinnacle 4. And it tells you exactly what Pinnacle thinks the half point is worth. And if they think it, they're pretty darn sharp. It's probably pretty close to true. That's how you do it. Spank Odds is the key to life, as far as I'm concerned. But I would like to talk.
I know. Let me say this. I know enough about Spank Odds, and you and I have talked about this obviously off camera. It's amazing to me as someone that doesn't understand how people come up with their edges, but just to see that and watch the changes, how they come and then how they come across, when they start somewhere and whatnot, it is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's the fun part about spank odds, when you can start to project what's about to happen. It's almost like you can see the future. And it always makes me smile when I see that.
That's right. That's right.
But I want to talk to you about the reason you and I became friends. We had a little bit of a problem here with one of my buddies in Vegas. I'll just say his name. His name is Brian. He called me up and he said, "Hey, I just heard this podcast, and this guy named Joe Durham was on it, and he's a really fascinating guy." I said, "Okay, give me the name of the podcast." I don't remember what it was on, and I listened to it, and I thought, I got to meet you. Brian calls me back the next day, and he says, "Hey, I've been betting with a Twitter bookie." I said, "What is a Twitter bookie?" He says, "It's a guy on Twitter that's a bookie." I said, "I never heard of such a thing." So I had a good laugh because I thought it was a joke. And he said, "This guy owes me significant money, and he just told me he ain't paying." This Joe Durham guy is an attorney in Georgia, and he goes after these kind of guys. He said, "Can you help me get through to him?" I said, "Let me listen to the podcast." I listened to the podcast, and I made a list of all the people that could get your personal cell phone number. First guy I called, he says, "Here's Joe's number. Just tell him I sent you." I sent you that text message. You got.
I remember. I remember it like it was yesterday. Because like I said, the story that he and I have had two stories with really significant sums that I had to get involved that are staggering sums, really. So, but yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday.
So this is the most interesting part to me. Can you explain how you can go after a paperhead bookie or an offshore bookie? How can you do that? And by the way, I wish I had known you 25 years ago, because I got stiffed real good when internet gambling first started.
Well, let me tell you how I learned about this law first. It's not necessarily related to sports gambling. So if when you're a kid, if you go to the movie theater or anywhere and they've got the claw game, you put $1 in, you move the thing and it drops down and you try to grab something, and of course you rarely win or whatever. Well, years ago, I got involved, and this is still a group of cases that I use. The state of Georgia has a law that the value of the item that the claw it tries to pick up has to be worth less than $5 wholesale value. Okay. So I have seen, now you go to places and they will have iPhones, they'll have Nintendo DS, all these high dollar Beats by Dre things. So I learned, and then I started saying, okay, and that's in the gambling code in Georgia about those, a very special law that allows them to do that. And so I started trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the damages? If you put your money in and you can't get it and they're in violation, how do you get paid? Or what is the damage? You get your $1 back? Or if you put 100 in there, do you say, "Hey, I want it back"? And so there's this statute on the books, and it's been on the books for forever. And what it says is this. First of all, gambling contracts are illegal and unenforceable, and that's because that makes sense. It's illegal. We're not, as courts, going to enforce a contract between people that's illegal. Same thing as a drug deal. If I'm supposed to be buying drugs from you and you sell me fake, I can't sue you. You sold me fake drugs, So here, when I am the player under this hypothetical situation, Munchkin will make you the Twitter bookie. I like that phrase, you're the Twitter bookie. Well, every bet that I make is a gambling contract between me and you. All right. And the consideration of that is what the bet amount is. So that's easy enough to figure right there. And what the law says is, while gambling contracts are unenforceable, we're going to make an exception. Number one, if you're the loser on that gambling contract, you're the loser, you have 6 months to sue to get your money back. Okay. Now, that's important. If you're the loser, you have 6 months. But after that 6 months, any person doesn't have to have placed a bet, doesn't have to do anything. It's very akin to being like a whistleblower. Think of it that way. Can come in, sue the bookie, the Twitter bookie, for every gambling bet winning that they ever had and get it back from them. And that amount can be huge. And the only thing is, so the way I do it, quite frankly, is your attorney's fees come off, then that person, if they weren't the loser, or if they were the loser even, and it's after 6 months, whatever they recover, they have to split between themselves and the educational fund for the county. So it's, again, it's an old law, but the analysis that the appellate courts have done, it says exactly what you would think. Hey, we're not going to enforce gambling contracts, but someone, i.e. the Twitter bookie, does not deserve to get rich off making money off of these illegal, these illegal things. So we're giving you an opportunity to go out there and claw this money back. So that's what we, that's what we do. And
now, what if you're the winner and he didn't pay you?
All right. So again, now you can't sue to not be paid if you were not paid necessarily. So what you do, you have to take the analysis. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about a case involving the Twitter bookie that we talked about earlier here. That Twitter bookie is still out there operating. That guy is, he's huge. We know he's huge. You and I, we've all know some of the dollar figures thrown out. We know the states he's lived, the different sub-agents he's put out there. It's crazy. His name is Leighton Thetford. The third. I've talked to his father. I've talked to his family members. I've talked to several people that were part of things with him. And so we can't go out and sue him, say, hey, you didn't pay Brian, my client. But what we can do is, because we have certain records that give me the ability to have jurisdiction in Georgia because of the electronic payments, say, okay, Mr. Thetford, now, Mr. Brian, we're coming. We're not worried about what you owe Brian, because we know how much money you've made over the years. We're coming for every nickel of it. And what that does is it puts the guy, Leighton in this case, in a really tough spot. So, and let's think about that. So he can either pay, all right? He can pay, and whatever that amount is, it can be a negotiated amount, or we do discovery and we've sent out dozens of subpoenas, for Venmo records, Apple Pay records, PayPal records, money other than crypto. Crypto's a little bit of a different animal, but you can't hide that stuff, because we're able to, when we send a subpoena to PayPal, well, we get the name that is with it, the bank account, all the transactions, and then we send a subpoena to that bank for the record, so we can track every dollar. And the other thing that happens is, let's assume, once again, Munchkin, you're the Twitter book, and I owe you $100, and you say, well, hey, don't send it to me. I actually owe Scott, so send Scott that $100, but we still will, through enough tracking down, we're able to cross-reference stuff and figure that out. So the $100 that I paid Scott, actually, because I paid it due to a loss to you, on our game account, I get to collect that back from you, even though you never received the money. So what happens there is, either they can fight and say they weren't a bookie, that they never took in any money. They can do that. But then we all know there are going to be messages, texts, and payment records that prove that. So they're not going to do that. They can plead the Fifth Amendment, which we've had that happen a lot. Say, I'm pleading the Fifth. Well, this isn't a criminal case. This is a civil case for damages and for money. So when you plead the Fifth in Georgia, at least on a civil case, there is a presumption that the reason you're not answering is because you would be guilty or would be against you. And so we're able to move forward with that. And then we've had cases where the guys ignore the lawsuit, and that's fine, but we get a valid judgment, we record it. And most of these guys, quite frankly, are usually younger guys. That judgment's recorded, and one day they're going to be older, going to have kids, grandkids or something, and they're going to go to sell some property, buy some property, and they're going to run into a jam because there's a big judgment that was recorded out there that has to be satisfied, that's been growing with interest for 10 to 15 years. So that's the way it works. And again, the key here is that it puts the book in a tough situation, because if they admit that they were the book, criminal charges are then, any law enforcement that's watching might get interested at that point in time. And, the law says we can't threaten, to go to the cops to settle a case. And certainly we don't ever do that. But, when it's out there in public filings, that's easy enough to do and to come with. Or they have to plead the Fifth. We either try to get the case resolved, and that's the only options they have. So it's a really neat tool. It's taken a lot of time to sort of perfect the way that we use it. Importantly, though, I do want to say this. The first thing I always do if someone contacts me, I say, look, okay, so, we'll use Scott. Scott was betting Munchkin on your Paperhead site. And I say, look, Scott, did you violate any of the rules on the Paperhead site? We've all seen them. You log in and says no botting, no whatever, because I want an answer. If you broke his rules, it's hard for me to get a guy on the phone and say, look, before we go down this road, do what's right. You set the rules. He beat you fair and square by the rules, do right. Because that's what I always say. If you set the rules, the player beats you fair and square, you need to pay them just the way you expect them to pay you when you lose. So I try to give everyone that fair opportunity in that regard. But then you'd be surprised how many of them think, well, there's nothing you can do. You can't sue me. What are you going to do? Sue me for being a bookie and taking bets? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what and this law, Georgia's not the only state that has it. There are a number of other states, and I don't mean this rude. I don't put out there which states do, because this is a niche practice for me, and I've spent a lot of time developing it, and it's turning out to be really good and really fruitful. And
I was going to say, I would think there'd be a line of lawyers moving to Georgia after, hearing about this.
Well, that's the thing, I don't know how many people have taken the time to dig in and find this and to think about it, because I don't want to give away all my trade secrets, so to speak, but there are inevitably payment records, text messages of, if Steve John, I'm just making up a name, says, hey, Joe, you can bet on this website, go to, webmail100.com, or one of the ones I'm working on now, the case that is pending there in Alabama, or against some people in Alabama. They were using hotwheels999.com and ebet3.com. Well, when they're texting you that and texting you the password to people and then saying, send this amount by PayPal here and this amount by Venmo, what are they going to say when they're put under oath? I mean, that's just hard. And then, there are things you can always say, well, let me look at your cell phone and your computer. Well, you have to do some things to make sure they're on notice to have preserved electronic evidence appropriately. Because if they haven't done that, that can lead to the presumption again that they destroyed it because they know it was there. So it's you just have to be willing to wade through it. And for me, it's something I enjoy. I like knowing about it. So it's not really work to me, and it's fascinating to me. But if people would just be honest and do what's right, we wouldn't be in this position. Now, I get that here we are talking about something that is, in a lot of places is technically against the law. So I get that, but there should be honor. If it's like a handshake, if you're going to bet on something, pay when you lose and pay the man when he beats you. So.
I definitely agree with that. I agree with all that. Is there anything else you can tell us specifically about the Twitter bookie case that my buddy Brian's involved in?
Sure.
Is there any kind of inside information you can give me? So nobody's listening to this. It's just
no. So this, I in all candor, you asked me, is there anything I don't need to ask? And what I told you is no, because I believe, look, if I'm going to say it, whether it be in court, an email, a letter, a phone call, on this podcast, I need to be able to prove it. And what I can prove here is that gentleman, who's a young guy, partnered with some people and then got a lot of sub-agents. He's now living in Florida in the Tampa area. I know the exact address. I'm not going to put that out there right now. I've talked to people that are, working with him now, and I've tried to tell them, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. But his, what he was doing is, and he still does it on Twitter, running these boosts. It's like he was saying, I don't think this is going to hit. I guess he thinks he's his own professional gambler, smart guy, so I'm going to boost this. And then some people that were smarter than he was, started hammering him on those boosts. And he just decided, I'm not going to pay you, but I'm going to keep taking payments from everyone else, So I tracked down, I probably tracked down no less than, I think we're like 34, 35 people that have were players with him, and that I've got payment records from going back and forth. So this guy, I don't know what he's going to, I'm eager to see what he's going to say. And I've talked to his parents. They have, or his father at least, has candidly acknowledged that he hates that his son is mixed up in this and hopes that his son will do whatever it takes to get this right, because he's either going to have to pay some amount that is going to be big, because it's, when Brian reached out to me and we started doing the digging, this guy is running a huge operation. I mean, a huge Twitter book operation, and got, last I saw him, I said 20 some odd thousand followers on Twitter, and is doing all sorts of, bonuses and everything to drum up money. And so he's either got to make this work, or if he ignores it, one day he's going to look back and say, "Dadgum, I didn't think that would ever come to that." And here we are. So it's going to be fascinating. A couple of these cases have really grabbed people's attention for different things. It's, one of the cases that are ongoing right now too is the one against the former Texas football player, Clark Ford. Guy played at the University of Texas, was a DB for 4 years, then worked for the Houston Texans. Same thing. I've got obvious, indisputable evidence of what's going on, and him sending messages, receiving payments, etc. And he's just ignoring it for right now. And I've tried to reach out to him personally on his cell phone. I sent him texts. He ignored them. And here we are. So he's, that lawsuit has been filed against him as well. So we're going to, and he was running a big operation at one time too. Again, when you can start looking and start tracking down people that have literally hundreds of players that you can find by looking at PayPal and Venmo records, that goes a long way. And, not to give away too many secrets, but for example, you can go on Venmo, and if it's not set to private, you can see a lot of people's transactions, and you find some of these Twitter bookies and it shows what they're paying for, or being paid for. Someone will pay them and be like, Chief screwed me, go Dolphins, things like that, and it's like, okay. So, and then you start tracking those people down and say, look, I'm not interested in going after you necessarily, but I want to know, what was this for? I tell people, look, this is who I am. I'm a real lawyer. You can do this. And I'm trying to get the evidence that I need. And if you, and talk with them, get the details from them, and then it just helps build my significant case.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say about Twitter bookies, and I think that's probably going to be our first legal case together, me and you. I'm going to need you to copyright that term since I've just developed it.
I like it.
So if you copyright that for me, because I would like you to go sue people that use it. But
that's my new Twitter handle, by the way.
There you go.
So here's the thing I want to say. Winning in this game is not easy. And if you're going to bet with Twitter bookies, your chances of getting paid are not 100% like they are the legal books.
Not at all.
Please, if you're listening to this, you've got to know what you're dealing with when you're dealing with one of these Twitter bookies. Don't let the balance get high. If you're going to bet with them, which I think you shouldn't, I do not. I have no PPH accounts. I won't get them. My profit margin is not high enough to sustain these kind of losses. But if you have to do it, don't let these guys get you to a significant figure before you get a hold of Joe. Joe will help you, but you're going to be so much better off if you just help yourself. And that's cut them off quicker.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Absolutely. Inevitably what happens is, first off, let me mention something about the margins. Something that anyone that's ever owned any rental properties, and it could be simple homes, duplexes, apartments, whatever, you factor in what we call a rent loss. There's going to be a period of time where it's not going to be occupied, so you're going to lose that. If you're using Twitter bookies, there's going to be a rent loss, or a non-payment loss. You just need to accept that. Mm-hmm. And that's something you have to deal with. And it's one thing based on I've probably had 20, 25 of these sort of things that I've got. Most of them have gotten resolved before we had to get too far. When you're, going back and forth, they're paying $500, $1,000, even $2,000, $3,000. But when you're getting up over that 5-figure, and you're dealing with someone you don't even know their real name or whatnot,
mm-hmm.
It's fun because you have that big bankroll and you think, oh, I can turn that. I've got an edge. I found an edge. I can turn that 10 into 25 over this next week. But what good's it going to do you? Are you better with 25 on paper that you may never get a nickel of, or maybe just being able to get, some portion of that 10 today and realize that, that out's not going to be any good anymore.
Very true. And the way they're doing it's with those boosts, because the boosts that they're putting out are enormous. But I'll tell you right now, I'll give you plus 300 on any team on the board, just as long as you know I'm not going to pay you. If you win, I'll give it to you on the favorite. It makes
well,
no difference to me.
you know, growing up, one of my favorite movies was Casino, and Joe Pesci's character in that, Nicky, who was based on obviously the famous guy, was it Tony Spilotro out there, you know, who Billy Walters mentions talks about him in his book. But, you know, when Robert De Niro's character's talking about him when he moves out there, how he was shaking down local bookies. If he wins, he collected. If he loses, he collects, you know. So that's what the Twitter books are. If they win, they collect. If they lose, they don't pay, you know. So that's an easy way right there. And they, you know, they think that you can't ever get their name because they're on Twitter, but inevitably, if they're using any of the true American-based electronic payment systems, whether it be Zelle, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Apple Pay, any of those, we can track that. We can track all that stuff down. It takes some time, but we can absolutely track it down.
Sounds really good to me. And so the best place to meet you then would be at BetBash 4, not via a Twitter DM saying, please help me go after this PPH. So I just want to say it one more time so everybody realizes this is not where you're going to go and be able to sustain yourself with a nice profit, because some of these guys flat aren't going to pay. And it's going to cut into your profit enough that you're now going to be a loser. And we don't want you to be a loser. Even though you'll have a lot of fun, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot tell you the number of people over the years that have reached out to me about, and, you know, again, I have to tell people when it's a $500, it's not worth my time and energy to try to collect that, you know. So there becomes a threshold where it has to be something worth, you know, doing and something worth going after and putting up the fight, because it does take time, especially to run down all those financial records to get them and to get people served. You know, people try to avoid service all the time. That's something we've been dealing with recently. I mean, you can always get them served, but that's going to take time and take money. So again, why risk yourself? You know, if you can, unless there's some reasons you really think this Twitter bookie is going to work out for you, just move on past them, because you're going to end up not getting paid, contacting me, and then, you know, hoping that we can recover something. And even if you get a judgment, knowing that it may be decades before that judgment is paid, if they even have anything, you never know. It could be a pure, you know, guy that really never amounts to anything in life and is just out there trying to screw people and take advantage of them on Twitter.
Very true. Is there anything else you want to say about the Twitter bookie that Brian's involved with?
No,
would you rather talk about the Alabama car dealer?
Well, I do want to say one about the case involving Brian. Look, that Pure Wage account, and it is a big one. Anybody who's out there that has dealt with them, either paid them, didn't get paid, did anything, and you want to help fellow gambler, you know, and better get paid, let me know. And because I can keep your name confidential. I'm just trying to build this info, because at the end of the day, one of the things that is important, because Twitter is where lots of the world's bettors like to get together to share information and talk and whatnot. Pointing out these people that are fake, that are frauds and won't do right is important. And you know, because they'll shut down one Twitter account and just open another one, or they'll block you and block everyone else and keep going. So, you know, knowing the names and the identity, so we can put that out there for people to know, to try to keep people from getting screwed, is important. So you can, you know, DM me on Twitter at Fishing Lawyer. It's Fishin with no G. You know, it's there on the screen. Because if you want to help, that's what you can do. Because I think we would be surprised, the more and more I've gotten into this, the people that have bet with this guy, you know, on the Pure Wage stuff. And it's a multi-state deal too. Like I said, I've got people in New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. You know, so there's a lot going on there.
Boy, a guy that big across so many state lines, I'm really surprised that he's not facing a criminal investigation.
You know, this is I want you to hold that thought, Munchkin, because that's going to become relevant in just a second. So just hold the thought, you know, and I'll explain why. But that is, in his case, you're right. I mean, you got all these different states, and he's moving around. He's got all these sub agents, and again, he's having people, you know, pay this person, pay that one, and that's when I told people, said, you don't realize it, but you've all of a sudden become an agent for the for the book, so to speak, you know, and so you could be responsible for that. And that's a unfortunate situation. That's the ultimate thing I like. And if anyone else wants to help, go to the Pure Wage, whatever the Twitter handle is. He's changed it so many times. I'll look in a moment. Go to his page, send a message saying you want to deposit, find out, send and ask for the PayPal address, Apple Pay, Cash App, anything where you make your initial deposit, screenshot it and send it to me, because that's what I need. Because we know that the initial deposits are going in his pocket. You know, that's one thing we know for sure. They're going to go to his pocket. So every different identity account that he's using would be fantastic. So that's a way people can help right there. And so we need to look that up, Scott, before we get done here today.
We'll do that, but that gives me that brings me a story I've got to tell you, and that's why I had to start making phone calls to friends of mine to get your text number or your cellular phone number, because you have your Twitter set up. Twitter made that change a couple of months ago, and you only accept messages from people with a blue check mark.
I need to change that right now.
Would you please change it?
Yeah,
That's why I wasn't able to send you one. That's why I started making phone calls and said, hey, I need Joe's cell phone number. And luckily I got it, which probably shocked you since you'd never talked to me before and then you saw me on your phone.
Well, the person you got it from is someone that is a heavyweight in this world, and somebody that I've been doing business with for a long, long time. And they've mentioned me on their podcast and stuff. So he knows how to track me down when needed, you know.
Right.
So, and I'm glad he did. I'm very glad he did, because I want people to do that. They need help, and I love talking to people. And I'm trying to find where I need to go in my settings to do this, so I'm trying to do that now. But it is I want people to be able to reach out, because I want to help clean it up. The view, especially the old view, let's even go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, is again kind of that mobster mentality with sports gambling. We need to bring it out of the dark, put it in the light. You know, put it in the light, put it out there. And so people can know that this is no longer something that's being handled by, you know, Nikki off a casino. You know, these are people that are smart and bright, and, you know, the books hire some very smart people to adjust those lines. And you see people that come off the book side and become a player all the time. So, I mean, this is it's real, and it's based on intelligence and skill. And that's why it doesn't need to be done in, you know, dark corners anymore. It needs to be out here in the open, and people need to know who they can trust and who they can't. So
I 100% agree. Bring it out, show the light on the whole industry, and let's let everything go the way it's supposed to do, because we want to be legal. We really do.
Absolutely. We do.
So now I'd like you to talk about the case that I don't know anything about. Can you talk about the Alabama car dealer?
I do. I can. And so that case has been filed as well. It's filed against two gentlemen in Alabama, one named Taylor Robinson, who owns a car dealership, Robinson and Sons Auto, and another named Justin Peak. And those gentlemen are partners. And you know, if you go back and look, Taylor Robinson's, if you Google him, look at him, you know, great community guy, involved with all these things, people singing his praise. He's doing all this great stuff. Then when you Google Justin Peak, one of the first things you learn is that in 2008, and just as a side, Gambling 911 did a little story on this. He was involved in a home invasion where he and two other guys broke into someone's house. He got shot, and I think he's paralyzed in a wheelchair now. And certainly I hate that happened to him, but sounds a little sketchy. I have sent an open records request for those records, and for whatever reason, I realized that's 15 years ago. I've met with some resistance in getting those, and some of the people that were involved with those two gentlemen are actually in Georgia. They are some of the same people that I mentioned earlier, but they've got a syndicate, a conglomerate. They've got a legitimate, you know, business form. They're doing everything pretty much on their end legally, but they wanted some outs with this guy, got set up. And what ended up happening here is they would not, for whatever reason, I think because they said they were sharps, that Taylor and Justin ended up saying, hey, we're not going to pay. And those guys contacted me and whatnot, and I wasn't able to necessarily help them right off because they went off on social media and started blasting them, you know, and on Facebook. I mean, just putting all the details out there. And one of the things they did is they kept tagging the sheriff's office in that county for over a year. They've said, we've sent you this. I've got screenshots. Why won't y'all investigate? Why won't you investigate? I've gotten a lot of messages from people and anonymous things saying, hey, they're not going to go after it because, these guys, one of them's family is super prominent, probably the wealthiest people around. They do that. So what you have here is a whistleblower, Mr. Short, who is the plaintiff in that case, has come in and has never, to my knowledge, he's never placed a wager in his life, knows nothing about it, but has said, hey, I saw your podcast, or someone sent it to me, and he's somewhat local, and I know him. We are related, actually. And he said, I'd like to be the plaintiff in one of those cases and see, what's out there. So those guys, that got all brought to my attention, again, because they didn't pay some sharps. And now we've got a lawsuit going against them that for every dollar they've ever received as part of their operation. And again, when we've dug in, this is a giant operation, a sure enough giant operation, and well over $100,000 they've received over the years in payments. And you got to remember, the way I look at it, and I think the law is pretty clear, what they paid out to other people that they lost on, that's not our problem. We're here to get every dollar you received, so that's a gross number that we're going after, and we'll see what happens. And I
wouldn't call $100,000 giant.
No, that's a fair point. When you're talking in the world of your local paper head, I think that's, I don't know exactly how big they are yet, but that's just what I've gotten. It may be way more than that. I mean, we all know some local people, I say local, that are much bigger than that are doing millions of dollars a year in gross, whatever. So we're going to find out how big these guys are. And I do believe that they are the top of the food chain on their particular group. The messages I've seen and some Telegram messages and things that clients, have saved and people sent to me show that. So it's going to be really interesting because you have these two people that on the surface seem diametrically opposed. One, and I don't know Mr. Peak at all. All I know is what is out there in the news and the records that I've seen, that he was involved in a home invasion when he was in college, and that he and two other guys broke into someone's house. Sounded like they were going to get some money or something, maybe. I don't know. That's pure conjecture on my part. And he gets shot. And then you've got Mr. Robinson, who comes from this great family, what seems like a great family, has this textbook marriage, beautiful wife, lots of children, worked as the finance dealer at one rather large car company, then opens his own. But what I'm hearing are that, the car front is actually a way that they're, cleaning some of the cash that's coming through there. So I don't know if that's true at all, but those are the things that I'm getting messages about and people saying. And there've been a lot of posts on Facebook, of all things, about that case with some people that had some bad experiences and some guys calling them out publicly. So we're always continuing to monitor that stuff to see what we can come up with, because again, I'm eager to see, are they going to acknowledge that they were books? Are they going to plead the fifth? Are they going to ignore it? I don't know where this is going to go. So I'm really curious to see what happens.
I have a question from the player side.
Sure.
A little bit off what we're talking about, but when you're talking about being able to subpoena the text messages and emails and all that kind of stuff, if you use an app like Signal that's encrypted and they have a setting in there, and you can set it so that all your messages disappear after 24 hours. So if you have that setting, and then you're hit with something like this, where they want to see all your text messages, and you say, hey, they're only there for 24 hours. Are you presumed guilty because you had used that setting? So
you may remember early on, I talked about trying to give notice so that they'll preserve certain things, and every state's law is different. Again, the reason I like to use Georgia's because it's something I'm intimately familiar with, but you can certainly put them in a position where potentially there's been a spoliation of evidence. If you've told them that you might be exploring this and they continue to get messages on Signal and don't save them, they have I believe, an affirmative duty to save every one. And if they haven't saved them, well, that's going to be, again, a presumption that the reason they didn't save it is because it would be harmful to them. And the other thing that comes here is I hate, and in some ways, I almost hate to say this, but the way I understand those pay-per-head sites work is you sign up online, and they charge you so much a player, and they're billing your credit card or something, so you're going to say, oh, I have nothing to do with this, well, what's this charge to pph.com or whatever it may be, that you're paying every month, for this. So those are the things that people, your Twitter books that don't think about it, you can catch them in that regard. So it's hard to deny things when there's any sort of electronic footprint out there. If you've got a lawyer and a team that really knows how to dig through that stuff, that's an easy thing to do.
I think this has been a great talk. Is there anything else that we haven't brought up that you'd like to talk about, Munchkin?
Oh, I would love to tell detailed stories of other people's business that would make everyone laugh, but I won't do that, here today, because it's not, not my business and not always my story to tell. Some of those people have talked about them at different times and things, but the main thing I would say is if you are a player, and you're going to use a Twitter book, know who you're using. Scott, what you said earlier is right. Don't get up big time and think that you're going to just be great to get paid. It's just not going to happen. More than likely, it's not going to happen. And if you're going to do the partnership stuff, make sure that you and your partner, no matter what it is, how it's set up, legal, out gray area, across the lines, whatever, still something that you both can rely on in terms of what the expectations were. Because, a lot of times, let's face it, you end up in, Scott, I'll use me and you as an example. Let's say we partnered up on something. You do well, you develop a friendship, you develop a relationship, and then you hate it when things turn south. And what I always say is, look, it doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to destroy the relationship. If you have already agreed ahead of time what the deal was, how it's going to be divided. And for example, this is just something else to add on. You have, let's put 4 people in a partnership, just person A, B, C, and D, and they have a legal agreement and everything else and understand it. But person A dies. Well, all of a sudden his shares are going to pass to his wife, or his children or whoever. Well, person B, C, and D probably don't want to be partners in that with his whatever. You need to have something if it's going to be truly a significant thing and you're doing this full time. This is what we're doing. We're beating these markets. That says, this is what happens when one of us exits the, whether it be a partnership, an LLC, a joint venture, whatever it is. This is how we're going to do that. This is how to be evaluated. And this is what you'll be entitled to, how some calculation is going to be done. Because otherwise it leads to hurt feelings and allegations that just aren't good for anyone.
Definitely agree. Munchkin, you got anything you want to close with?
Nope. This has been great. Really.
Well,
really
I appreciate it. And like I said, I've enjoyed chatting with y'all off and swapping stories and Bet Bash 4. I can't wait. I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make that work. Because everyone I've talked to that's been have just said, it's great. And the sort of the camaraderie and getting to meet and interact, people you talk to on Twitter all the time. And there are clients of mine that go to that I've never met in person. I've talked to them a lot and stuff, but meet them in person, and that was just something that I think would be a lot of fun.
Well, I'll just tell you this: it's the greatest 3 or 4 days of your life.
Right.
And there's no way I'm willing to listen to any other argument. And every year it's bigger. Every year it's better. I can't wait for Bet Bash number 4. One of the things I like to do in life is to put things back together. For example, Spanky took away Bookie Better Breakfast from Bet Bash number 3. So I put it back together, and I have a couple secret meetups where I have a whole bunch of people come all to lunch together. I'd sure like you to be involved in that.
I would absolutely love that. And, going back, one of the things that I've heard a lot of people talking about is even your Twitter bookies or your pay-per-head bookies that say they don't want sharp action. I know enough to know that if you really want to make being a Twitter book or whatever a big part of your life and your income, there's a way to use sharp plays and sharp players to your advantage. Now, I'm not saying go tail them because the line's going to move and you'll probably get blistered, by having the bad line. But, we hear people talk about it all the time. There's value in knowing that stuff and not just trusting necessarily a click of a button that, I'm going to automatically or blindly follow Chris or Pinnacle or whatever it's going to be. So education and learning is the key to everything.
definitely is. And you'll learn more that 3 or 4 days at Bed Bash than you will even believe.
Well, I am. I'm looking forward to it. And what we need to do is in a couple of months, get back together and we'll give an update on some of these cases.
I'd like to do that every 3 or 4 months. Whenever you've got a significant case, we'll bring this back together. But I also want to say one more thing here before we close out. And that is, I was a huge fan of Gambling with an Edge. And I was really, really disappointed when my buddy Munchkin decided to end it. We put it back together today. Unfortunately, Bob Dancer wasn't able to attend, so I guess I will play the role of Bob Dancer. But this was a pleasure getting to talk to you guys. And yeah, in 3 or 4 months, when you have a big break and you've got a big settlement for my buddy Brian, because I'm going to charge him half what he gets.
There you go. There you go.
And then you can bring me all the paperwork on the copyright for the word Twitter book. We're gonna have a good get together.
I'm buying the website name right now.
I can see the shirts now. Twitter book. You know, that's they'll be a hit at Bet Bash. There's no doubt. You know, we need to have them printed and ready to go, selling them out of the back of the damn suitcase or something. You know, and the case involving Brian is going to be really, really interesting. It's because of the interrelated web and the sheer scope of what this guy's doing and his intentional decision to ignore, everyone despite the overwhelming evidence. It's one I'll definitely keep everybody updated on.
That sounds really good to
me.
me.
You guys, like I said, we can always share more stories off screen. So it's been a blast, and I look forward to it. Again, I'm going to make it where people can contact me on Twitter. And again, anybody wants to help, reach out to Pure Wage. Maybe I can find I think I can find that handle right now.
You can send it to me after the recording and I'll put it in the tweet. Yeah,
because they blocked me when here we go. It's Pure Wage _. At Pure Wage _ and find out the addresses they want those initial deposits sent to. You can, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we can help flush out more of the bad guys from this industry.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to get flooded in your email or in your direct messages. I don't think you know what's coming because there's a lot of people that need you, and I'm so glad you're out there to help us.
Well, I'm glad to. I like it. And like I said, a lot of the questions I get are exactly what we talked about again. How do we set this up? And I've tried to give some tips here. And again, even for the young aspiring people, all I can tell you is the people on the Mount Rushmore of the sports gambling world, I've had conversations with them about this. They followed it. They've done it. And I'm not an expert. Like I said, I don't do anything on taxes. Every state's different. But I will definitely, the things I can give you general advice on, I'll do. The things I can do for you, I will do if you want me to. And at the things I can't, I'll get you pointed to someone that I know and trust that has expertise, in that area. So if you're putting your money into this, serious money, make sure you do your homework and have yourself, situated the way you need to.
That sounds like a perfect place to stop this. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening. Don't be afraid to reach out to anybody here on the panel if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.